wanted to talk a little bit today about asana and the relationship of asana and posture practice to the path of yoga. I think today, and especially in the past 100 years, asana has evolved and posture practice has expanded in terms of its scope. But in the ancient tradition, the idea of the posture practice was, it wasn't as extensive as it is today in terms of the scope of physical practice. Rather, if we look at, for example, the Yoga Sutras, and then later in the Hatha Yoga texts, there are very few asanas listed actually as part of the path of yoga, and all of them without exception are seated postures, which tells us that from a traditional perspective, it was the seated posture that was the most important. Now, a lot of modern yoga today and people practicing yoga are not so interested, at least in my observation, with the seat, which is interesting, but also could be just the times that we're living in. People are less and less interested in the things that aren't as sexy. For example, a handstand is far more appealing to an Instagram audience than someone sitting in meditation posture. So that's interesting, right? It's a shift in the times, and when it comes to classical yoga and the asanas that go with classical yoga, the posture and the seat was seen as of utmost importance. And there's a quote, I'm forgetting which text it was in, but it talks about the importance of the yogi's seat. So what is it about the seat that is so valuable to the yogi, to the practitioner of yoga? And how does it relate to the path of yoga? Well, in the Yoga Sutras, there are stages of the graduation of one's awareness as an individual to the supreme state where the individual self dissolves and the recognition dawns and the realization dawns that one as an individual is not separate from the consciousness, the whole. So this path of yoga, we are looking at how to arrange our life so that the experience of interconnection, the experience of our inseparability from the universe is invited in. I feel like that's really valuable to remember for those on the path of yoga, for the sake of understanding, well, what is the goal? What is the ultimate result of this path? Now, let's go back to looking at the seats. Classical seats, for example, Padmasana is one of them. In Padmasana, the process of developing the flexibility in the body to sit in Padmasana allows the yogi, once they're there, to be able to relax into the structure. And if we see from the Yoga Sutra 2.46, Sthira Sukham Asanam, this sutra, and then the subsequent one after that, are giving us instructions about the state of one's being necessary for the experience of yoga. So asana wasn't seen as, in particular, a type of posture necessarily. or it wasn't really a technical thing. It was more referring to the inner state of one's being as they are practicing yoga. So if I am sitting and moving my awareness inward to subtler and subtler levels in order to arrive at the state of meditation, meditative absorption rather, on the Supreme, then in order to access those subtler and finer realms of perception, my seat must be steady, sthira, and easy, sukham. And without that combination of steadiness and ease, then there is a difficulty, or perhaps even it might be impossible, to internalize my awareness sufficiently so that I can contemplate on the ultimate reality. In Hatha Yoga, what we see is a gradual deepening into the technical explanation around how asana and pranayama together open the doorway to the more advanced stages of yoga. So we see in Hatha Yoga more of a specific technical instruction around what is called Raja Yoga, the royal path of union, right? Raja means royal, and Raja Yoga is the term given to the classical yoga of Patanjali through the Yoga Sutras, which describes and explains what yoga is. Yoga's chitta vritti nirodha, the stilling of the fluctuation of the mind, so that the seer, tadas svarupe, so that the seer can dwell in its own nature, right? So what is the seer? It is the consciousness behind the individual, right? There's an intelligence, there's a force that gives life through us. And that infinite force that's moving through us is then filtered and contracted and consolidated around a set of ideas and personalities and identities and attachments and preferences and likes and dislikes. That infinite is then limited to those things. And that's what we call our ego, our self-referencing point, the locus of the infinite that is structured around a continuous identity. In the spiritual path, the process of opening to the spiritual realm is a process of creating, this is in my belief and my understanding, it's a process of creating an opening on the level of the identity to be able to perceive something that is beyond the individual self. And that opening to spirit, if we want to call it that, that allows change to take place. It allows there to be a release of attachment, a release of identification, which some of those attachments and those identifications can be limiting. They can hold us fixed on our beliefs, our ideas about ourselves and about the world, which prevent there to be the expansion. And the process of yoga is really a process of gradual expansion of oneself, of one's awareness, to be able to rest in one's true identity, one's true nature. And so the asana is a key part of that, to be able to sit. And then once I can sit steady, comfortable, easy, relaxed, focused, then the process of pranayama can occur, the process of circulating the life wind, the life force, and restraining it, because the prana is what is going out through our senses to perceive the world. It's what's animating and illuminating the mind. And so the information from the senses, the raw data of the universe, is coming in through our senses to be interpreted by the manas, the mind, and then reflected to the ahamkara, the ego, at which point, through that process of the raw data coming in, the interpretation of it, and then categorizing it in relation to our identity, the identity then goes back out into a projection of the universe. And it is our projection of the universe, our projections and our stories about what we experience that give them meaning, which that energy, which is giving them meaning, right? It requires energy to give meaning to something, to give life to something. And that energy that we give to the meaning of things is what allows them to exist. This goes for everything, good or bad. So it is the life force behind that coming through us that is then animating what we consider to be existing, but it's not the ultimate reality, at least not according to the tradition of yoga. So I like to call it the return journey home. We trace those steps backwards to the source to become aware of, well, where is that force emerging from, right? How is it that I am creating my life? And is there anything about my life that is not necessarily in alignment? This is a challenging question to reckon with. If I take an honest look at myself, I might notice that there are things that I would like to change. I might notice that there's patterns of behavior, ways of thinking, ways of talking to myself in my inner world, and also ways of talking to others, right? Because that the inner dialogue spills out into my environment. There might be ways that are not necessarily ideal. And for spiritual transformation to take place, to allow the identity to change forms, that's what transformation means, there has to be a severance, a cutting of the attachments, of the energy traveling out, just temporarily at least. And this is the idea of renunciation. We don't need to go to a cave to renunciate. Every time we close our eyes and we internalize our awareness and stop the mind from traveling out to animate the things that we are projecting, every time we do that and we continue to bring our awareness in, there is a release of energy, the bonds are broken. And if we do that enough times through repetition, and this is where the practices of kumbhaka are very helpful and essential actually to the practice of yoga, because kumbhaka is the restraint of the breath, which restrains the prana, right? It's like a mini death. Every time we hold the breath, carbon dioxide levels rise in the bloodstream, and if we increase our tolerance of that, then we deepen our experience of letting go. More things can be excavated from the different layers of the body. That's not just the physical body, right? There's many other layers that we're working with. So that's what we're looking to do when we're practicing asana. And this can happen in all of the postures that we do, provided we're aware of what are the essential principles of asana practice. And I don't want to go too far into this in this video, but I'll just leave you with this. The first step of the Hatha Yoga, if we're looking at the sutras, is ahimsa, non-violence. How many times do I practice asana and exert myself beyond what is necessary, right? Like using more force and more effort than is necessary, and therefore inflicting violence on myself, on my body, imposing the mind on the body. And just think about that for a moment. If I'm doing that, then what am I practicing? What am I practicing? What am I embodying as I practice? What qualities and virtues are being perpetuated if, when I practice, I am forcing? And then how does that practice that I'm doing, where I'm forcing, carry over into my life, right? And then think about what happens if I change that approach. So at the end of the day, if I'm practicing yoga and my intention is to bring myself into more balance and more harmony with the totality of existence, then how should I practice? Right? Not necessarily what, but how. Because if I arrive into my seat, into my sitting position, and my mind is agitated, then how am I able to internalize and contemplate on the light and the divinity that's at the very core of my being? My mind will remain agitated and keep pulling me out and continue to animate the stories and the things that I'm trying to transform. Hope this is helpful, and I look forward to sharing more with you about the path of yoga in future videos. See you soon.